everybody. I'll go ahead and call our Sandy City Council work session to order. We'll do a quick review. Actually, let's go ahead and call the roll. Jeff.
Councillor Peitzold.
Here.
Councillor Smallwood.
Here.
Councillor Sheldon.
Excuse.
Councillor Walker.
Here.
Councillor Exner.
Lou.
Councillor Hokinson.
Here.
Mayor Pulliam.
Here. All right, thank you for that, Jeff. Per usual, we'll do a quick review of tonight's agenda. I'll pause to see if there's any questions for staff before we get into it tonight. We will have a presentation on development code cleared objective audit introduction. We'll go to our consent agenda, which has our city council meeting minutes from our October 3rd meeting. Under resolutions, we'll get into the CWSRF construction loan amendment number 2. Nothing under old business. Under new business, we have the owner's representative services contract amendment number 3. SandyNet enrollment and affordability connectivity program. All right, we'll then round up our evening with reports from City Manager Jordan Wheeler, as well as our committee and councilor reports. Getting into our work session, we have one item on our work session meeting agenda for this evening, the school resource officer contract. Chief Roberts, welcome. Jordan.
Yeah, before Chief Roberts does a brief presentation before the work session kicks off and answering your questions, I wanted to thank Chief and also Tyler Deans for taking the lead negotiating with the school district. We're a little overdue, but not from the lack of trying to work with the school district and bringing this to a close. It's been, I think productive conversations. I think it just, the nature of taking time to kind of go through this and represent our interests and make sure the school district interests are represented too, that we're here in October trying to button up a contract that I think expired back in July, but both parties have been fine with honoring the previous contract. But again, I wanted to thank the chief and Tyler, and Chief will go through some of the background and through the staff report to kind of set the stage for the work session. But definitely appreciated Tyler and Chief's work on getting our contract, as you see in the draft there in the packet, to a place that represents more of what we were aiming for a shared cost structure with the new 3-year contract for the program, or 4-year contract actually. So Chief, you want to go ahead and walk through the changes and some of the background on our SROs? That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. We wanted to have an hour for this because we figured there'd probably be more of a discussion and questions than anything else. Pretty short staff report. You can see the changes in there and what we had worked out with the school district, but we figured there might be other questions and just wanted to have a discussion with all of you. Your thoughts and your input and have your questions answered. I started negotiating with the school district earlier in the year, and we had some numbers that were that we presented that we felt pretty good about. We wanted to get to half or 50% of salary and benefits. If you see in the staff report, there was a period of time there when the school district was paying fairly close to half of just the salary. And that's just that's a portion of what the city is responsible. So we felt it fair that we get to we get to 50% of the salary and the benefits package. So we started working on that. We had some really good discussions with the school district and had a contract that we thought was pretty good worked out. We did meet with a few counselors and the mayor to discuss that. And after that discussion, we felt like we needed to go back and just renegotiate a little bit, just to get the numbers a little bit different. There wasn't much change in there. There was some percentage changes, and in the year to year, there was some unknowns as well. All of you know that we're still in negotiations, and so we don't really know what the outcome of the new contract's going to be. So there was some questions there. That stuff is really hard to predict, but we did get, had another, and I want to thank Tyler again for sitting down with myself and the school district and for quite a period of time. And it was crucial for him to explain the numbers and how we got to those figures, because that's in our environment, it's a little different than say school district employees and police employees. It's a little bit different on the benefits portion as far as PERS and health insurance and things like that. They're just, I don't think were understood at the beginning, but now they were very clear at that meeting. So thank you, Tyler, for that. I really appreciate it. Made things a little bit easier. And after sitting down that time, we came up with some different numbers, which you see in front of you. We've provided school resource officers for years, or officer, I should say, for years to the school district. And at the time when we were in a contract to provide police services with the city of Estacada, where that ended in 2018, we had some, we had some budget problems that we had to work through. At that time, the school district had offered to, they wanted a second school resource officer, and they had offered to help fund that position. And so we did that and put 2 school resource officers in the school, in the Oregon Trail District schools at that time. And that was the time when they were, what you see in the report is when they were paying a certain amount, but it was just for the salary per officer at that time. So we wanted that to change, and they were agreeable to that. And it took a little bit of negotiating, but the school district was really good with us. And this is kind of what we got worked out. So we wanted your input on this. And we knew that there would be questions. So I just wanted to basically take the time to answer any questions that folks had, because the contract is, pretty cut and dry, and so is the staff report. So that's, I didn't feel the need to read through that. All of you probably have already read that. So I'd love to take questions, try to answer any questions you have, or concerns, of course, too.
Thanks, Chief Roberts. Appreciate it. And really appreciate all the work that went into this with you and Tyler and the Oregon Trail School District, and that partnership, right? One where they stepped up to the plate and helped us in a tough budgetary situation a couple of years back that provided more safety for our kids and for our community as well. And thanks for the kind of the midway update you provided, Counselor Hokinson, myself, and Counselor Sheldon. So appreciate that. Any questions?
I just want to say a comment.
Yeah.
6:07, and you finish the staff report. That is a record since the council.
Well, if you want, I can go back and read it. I
please,
just really
no,
wanted
this
the
is good.
discussion to happen. I
Exactly.
figured that was the
I
most
love it
important
when we
part.
can have more discussion and less presentation.
Yeah, this is not, this is an easy read, so I figured let's just get the questions out there and concerns and talk about that and work those things out if we need to. So anyway, yes, please
So
ask away. And
2 actual questions for you. Maybe to start things off. You mentioned that the school asked for a second resource officer. Can you give us a background about why they did that? What were they looking to get out of it? What led up to that request? And then kind of how is it? Give us the state of how it's been working out since then.
well, when we had the single resource officer, the school district has always wanted somebody that we could spend a little bit more time at, say, the middle school and the grade school in town, which when we had one, there just really wasn't much time for that. The school district also wanted to increase the training. I don't know if you're familiar with the Run, Hide, Fight program, but that was taking quite a bit of time to train, because when we started this program, we wanted to train everyone in the school district so they were all on the same page. And we felt like to do that, we needed to have hands-on training with them and not just, here's a packet for you. And it's really worked out rather well, but that took up a lot of time as well. They felt, and so did I at the time, that having an additional resource officer in there would cover some of the other schools, such as the middle school and the grade school when they needed it. And also bolster the training platform that we had before, which is, it's quite a bit different now than it was back then, as far as the tabletop exercises, the live training exercises, the active shooter, as well as that Run, Hide, Fight and things like that we do throughout the year, not just before the teachers go back into the school session. We train all the new incoming teachers, and then now it's because of the second officer. Now they've kind of made it mandatory for returning folks to get that training as well. We didn't have the manpower to do that before. With two, we can have the training going on at two different schools. It only takes one to do the presentation. It takes both of them to do the live training. So that helps out a lot as well. And then they also participate in all the tabletop exercises, emergency operations, things like that. And the school district has always been very concerned about the kids and the safety of kids in school. And it's their feeling that I just personally felt that if they could have two, which they wanted, they want that. In fact, it's so anyway, I won't get into it any further than that, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
And you said you had another, I thought you had two questions.
Well, the other one, more detailed, but you mentioned the 611 incidents. Can you give us an idea how that divvies out between the schools, the 611 across all the schools? How does that distribute out?
Yeah, over almost 3/4 of that is at the high school.
Okay.
So, and then you do see also a difference in the numbers there. I put those both in there. One was when we had some COVID issues. So you see a lower number
Sure.
on the one. That's when the kids weren't in school the whole time. And during that time, the officers that were assigned to the school were working patrol. When the kids were in school, it was a strange schedule for the school. Everybody knows that the school had certain days when they would have in school in session, and then sometimes they wouldn't. So it was just it was kind of a balancing act that we had. We just pulled them out and they were on patrol when school wasn't in session, but the numbers are lower for that. But about 70, that's a round number. 75% of those calls were probably at the high school.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for putting all this together.
Of course.
As you know, this is
My
kind of
pleasure.
one of those things I've been kind of
Yeah.
interested in since I was early on the budget committee. So it's wonderful to see the numbers and see an increase in the amount of money that's coming in. And, I think the bottom line for all of us is that just, finding these outside funding sources to help offset the costs is really going to help all of us. So thrilled to see it. The questions I had to do with are the, you mentioned the cost for the two Sandy SROs is 281,000 change. Is that for the existing school resource officers, and is that the whole year or 9 months of the cost?
No, that's the whole year, and it's the ones that are in there now.
Okay.
So there's when we were in negotiations, we took we thought it was fair to take a middle of the officers have a salary range. And we took the middle of the road, right in the middle of the salary range is what we took for the salary and then their benefits. Now, the two that are in there are on the higher end. They're not, I think one of them is at the top and one of them is close, if I'm right, but they're higher than that. They're a little bit more than that. But they only have one more year. They may, the next ones that go in will probably be, because the staff we have now will probably be, there's a good chance that they're going to be at the lower end of the scale. So it'll be a little less for those officers that are going to be incoming.
But this 281 is the ones that are there.
The ones that are there now.
Great. That was my major question. Let's see. That's my major question now. Thanks.
I thought you had if I can bring, we had a short email this morning,
Yeah.
right? And I think a really good question about the amount of folks that come in to the schools and that live outside the district. I thought it was important to touch on that too. And Jordan, thank you, Jordan, he answered that. I was going to type something up and didn't kind of have that. So I appreciate that. But that's totally right. I don't know if it's 2/3 exactly.
That's what the library district kind
Folks
of figured
live
out.
outside the school district. And then, but a large number of them come into the city to go to school, whether they go to the high school and they live up at, say Welch's, for example, and they go to the high school here. And then of course, at the end of the school day, they go back home. But while we're serving them, they're in the city. So it's almost like you can compare it to, people driving through. We're responsible for that too. When they come here, that number gets bigger because the biggest school in the district, of course, the high school, and the middle school is a large population of students as well. And a lot of those students are coming in from other areas. So it was important. That was a really important point that yes, some of them, a lot of them do live outside
Mhm.
the city limits, but then they come here within the city limits to go to school. Not all, because they have Furwood Elementary, of course, and then a couple other schools outside that,
Boring and
Boring.
Welch's, yeah.
Boring and Welch's
A lot of Sandy
and
kids go to
Kelso
Boring,
and Kelso. But but I thought that was an important point.
Yeah. And it was just basically asked, that again, 1/3 of the school district population lived within city limits and 2/3 was outside. And so trying to kind of, again, make sure that we're not subsidizing the cost of our school resource officer, which is such an important program, that we're not subsidizing that cost, for all those 2/3 population is kind of, again, just trying to kind of look at other funding sources that we have at our disposal to try to help plug the holes that, or the gaps that we have to deal with the,
Yes,
raises
yeah.
that we're going to be giving out
Yeah.
deservedly, and then any other changes that we want to make to kind of increase staffing or anything like that.
Yeah, and I thought that was an important point as well, is looking at those other funding sources. Honestly, I don't know what those are at the time, but it's important, like you said, we need to be looking for these things. How can we, if we have to hire another officer, how are we going to do that? What are the funding sources? What are we going to pull from? All the budgets are really tight, of course, especially in this economy. But I thought that was an important point as well.
Additional questions?
Yeah, finally. I suspect that we're not doing anything with an SRO in outside the city limits, right? Different schools like Boring and Furwood, those things, we're not delivering
It's a lot. This is school district wide.
I'm asking you.
No, that's a good question.
What, Welch's too?
What's
Not
that?
going to Welch's, are we?
Well, we have gone to Welch's, yes, and we will if there's an incident up there.
If
We
there's an
will go.
incident.
We are not the only ones that are going to go to say like, if there's a major call at any of the schools, we're obviously
Oh,
going to go
sure.
at any of the schools, and so are outside agencies. That's the kind of response that you're going to get, say, to an active shooter call or something, God forbid, or something of that nature. You would get not just us, you would get everyone that's around, right? So, but yes, we have gone up there. We've gone up there for some training, haven't gone up to do training. Also, if there's a call up there where, say, kids are fighting or something like that, then we do go up there. We don't spend as much time up there as we do at these ones here. At the high school and the middle school, they take up most of the time.
Okay,
But we do go around to those other schools periodically.
okay. So the monies that we're spending is, what would you say, 90% is inside the city and the other?
I would be guessing at
Some
the
of the-
percentage. I really would, but, and I don't have those exact numbers. I could break down a call load and, sift through the calls for service that we had. It would be a guess to say 90% here, but it's an overwhelming majority is here.
Sure. I'm not even sure I'm worried about officers attending Furwood or Boring or things just outside the city. I think those are helpful places, and anytime we want to keep our kids safe, and I think it was mentioned earlier, many of these kids live in Sandy but travel right outside. So there's our children, their parents are paying taxes, all that sort of thing. We're trying to figure out how much we were actively, regularly putting an SRO into outside city limits. But we're not doing that particularly, right? We're just attending it for.
Well,
events.
the majority of the time spent is high school and middle school.
Got it.
But they do go to the other schools. I want to be clear on that.
Sure.
They do spend some time there. And we wanted it that way. And there's reasons for that. We felt when we entered into this agreement, it's been years ago, we felt like the best way to handle the safety as far as some of the major calls and the things that are going on in the country was to, if we're going to do this, let's do it district wide. Because what you get if you don't is a mixture of different types of responses from different agencies and how those people are trained. We didn't want that. We didn't want half the school district to be trained in our run, hide, fight program and the other half to be trained in a different program, which we wouldn't have no control over. The school district was instrumental in that, saying, hey, we want to do this. This is what we want to be involved in, this program. And they have made that decision as well. And as a result of that, we've had folks from around the country that have contacted the school district and our police department and wanted us to present, how do we make this program work?
Okay, great.
And we did some of that. We felt that was the best way. Because when everybody's on the same page as far as those types of incidents, if they're trained the same way, they're going to fall back to that. And we felt like we needed to have everybody on that same page. And that's how that kind of started. There were concerns when we started about, hey, well, how much time are our officers that work in the city of Sandy going to be spending out there? Those were concerns, but we felt like with what we had, that it wasn't a large concern for us with the time spent and what we were getting from the program.
Well, there's a real strong rationale for doing exactly what you said. I think that's certainly much my favor. I would certainly advocate for that. The question I have is it legal to spend monies outside the city on subject like this? Okay, no issues.
Agreement. And yeah,
Okay,
This isn't the only place.
sure. I just want to make sure that we're not crossing any legal lines. Okay, great. And then the last one I was going to ask was during the 9 months we're actively involved in the schools and all that, but during the 3 other months, do we get much involved in the schools during the summertime when school is out? You said there were some times when the COVID was preventing them from meeting and stuff. We didn't have an SRO on the school's grounds. So
What do they do?
During the summer months, the officers that are assigned to the school district are assigned to patrol.
Okay.
So there's not much going on in the school in the summer months for the SROs. They do not act as school resource officers when school's not in session. Now, they do go back a little bit early. The reason that we do that is for the training, because we do that periodic, that annual training for all the folks in the school district. So that, the teachers come back a little bit earlier than the students. So do my SROs to start that training process. So there is a little bit there. You could say there's probably a week there where they go back before school starts. Yeah. And there's other things going on too, preparation. They're taking everything back. They have equipment there and things of that nature. But it's not a large portion. It's probably a week, maybe 2 weeks tops. But during the summer months, they are back on patrol.
So anytime there's an incident, say like on the high school during the summer months, it wouldn't matter if it was the SRO,
It doesn't matter.
anyone.
Anybody who is working at the time of the incident would take those types of calls, whether it's at the school or not.
Cool.
Yeah, it's not just assigned to them.
Excellent. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Well, any more questions, discussion? I feel really good about this. Thank you again for all the work you did. As mentioned, all the incidents that go right here into the high school. I think that's a pretty big deal. When we were talking, when you were giving an update to Councilor Hokanson, Sheldon, and myself, it was mentioned, there was just a lot of times we were going to have to respond to incidents to the high school and to these schools, whether we had an active officer on campus or not, and it helps with response times and relationships once on campus and everything, having these officers there. So, when we think about some of the incidents we've had just in our greater area, not in Sandy, thank the Lord, but in our greater area through the state and the country over the last year, a couple of years, the positive relationships with their officers from a young age just is terrific. So thank you for everything. I appreciate it.
I just say, I agree. Thank you so much. I just know since school started, just here locally in the local region, not in Sandy, but we've had threats of activity. I don't want to necessarily say this in public, but if you can catch the drift that, and thank you for being in the high school. Thank you for being in the school. Because the response is going to be a lot better. They also get to know you guys. And I've learned this I'll get it off right now, Lori. I'll say it for a long time now. No, but the students that are all coming in, I think you did a great presentation of, they are here in just like cars driving through, or people going to Fred Meyer's that live outside the community. They're in our schools in the area, but they also get to know you at this age. Now having a freshman in high school, and then what do freshmen do in high school? Well, they have fun, but they also don't have cars, so they're walking around town all over the place, whether they live inside the city limits or not. So my wife and I was just like, I wonder what they're doing right now, because this is new territory for us, but knowing that other people as well, and just knowing that you guys have a positive relationship with them, from what I've learned over the years, has helped in our community. So whether they live inside our city limits or they don't live inside them, they're part of our bigger, broader community that you will be responding to regardless of the line on the map.
Yeah, and that is a big part of their job, is developing those relationships and acting as a, in some instances as a mentor. They're passionate. The two we have in there now, and the next two will be just as good, I'm sure. I'm not saying that they're better than other officers, but they are very passionate about their job as a school resource officer. So, and they work hard to develop those relationships. And we do get phone calls from parents many times throughout the school year about their work there and how much they appreciate them. That they really put in the effort to develop those relationships with our youth. And they're also coaches. They act as coaches too, so they help coach and things like that during their own time, of course. but they just things like that, and they're very passionate about it. So, and we feel like it makes a difference in the long run, of course.
So we used to have, long time ago, Lori, when I first got on, they used to have cadets. Used to have a cadet program. I think you were here when we probably had it at the beginning.
Yeah, that was just about when it ended, I think. Yeah.
And so, as we're trying to build a workforce, whether it's in technology or into the police field, I think there's a lot of grow your own type of mentality, but also in that as well. I don't know about what your thoughts are on having something like that, because I know there's a lot of other issues that come along with that program. But I'm just proud that we have supported our districts. Our district has supported our police station or police department, and unlike some other communities around us who have done just the opposite. So I appreciate that, and for whatever the reasons are for doing that, I appreciate that we have supported each other in that.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Yep.
Just want to say, appreciate you going back to the school and bringing those numbers up, taking that feedback from us before. I appreciate that. But I'm in favor of moving ahead with this. So, but I do want to explore and maybe just plug this idea of going after additional funding for SROs as we move forward to the next budget biennium and so forth. There's some candidates running for county positions that are advocating for more SRO funding. Well, I'd like to make sure that we got our ear open and we're watching and looking for any opportunity to supplement that from whatever sources we can. So that's it.
Thank you. All right, I'll adjourn this work session. Sandy City Council meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, well, welcome everyone. For normal practice, I'll start with a review of tonight's agenda. We'll call for any changes to tonight's agenda. We'll then go into public comment. Nobody is submitted for online, but we do have 2 submitted for in-person public comments when it's time for that. After public comment, do we have any responses to previous weeks? Okay. We'll have a response to previous week's public comments. We'll go into presentations where we have a development code and cleared objective audit introduction. In our consent agenda, we have our city council meeting minutes for October 3rd. Under resolutions, we have the CWSRF construction loan amendment number 2. Nothing under old business. Under new business, we have the owner's representative services contract amendment number 3, as well as SandyNet enrollment and affordability connectivity program. We'll round off the evening with a report from our city manager, Jordan Wheeler, as well as our committee and city council reports. Jeff, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Councilor Petzold.
Here.
Councilor Smallwood.
Here.
Councilor Sheldon.
excused.
Counselor Walker,
Here.
Counselor Exner,
Here.
Counselor Hokinson.
Here.
Mayor Pulliam.
Here. With that, I will call in any proposed changes to tonight's agenda. Hearing none, I'll move to public comment. We have 2 submitted public comments for this evening. A reminder, when your name's called, to please state your name and address for the record. You'll be provided 3 minutes, and Jeff, our city recorder, will give you a 20-second warning. With that, I will call on Evelyn. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Evelyn McLean. My address is 4280 Salquist Road in Gresham. I've currently owned a business in Sandy for 14 years. I'm here tonight to encourage this board to not postpone the upcoming opportunities that we have in this community as it relates to psilocybin. I'm urging those of you who don't know the benefits of how psilocybin can help our community to consider this. As of right now, it is estimated that 58% of our adult population in the United States is on some form of antidepressant or anti-anxiety medicine. Psilocybin shows no addictive qualities or traits. This is not an addictive drug. This is not the same thing as marijuana. There's no plans to open stores in neighborhoods and sell mushrooms to the general public. For those who want to take mushrooms for recreation, they're already doing it illegally. This is a huge opportunity to assist therapies that are directed at the following: PTSD, smoking cessation, alcoholism, getting off addicted drugs such as heroin, pain pills, cocaine, marijuana, depression, trauma, therapy for cancer patients, end-of-life therapy. Research is also being done for treating Alzheimer's, weight loss, memory care, and chronic fatigue syndrome. The following are just some of the universities and institutions that have been conducting experiments and researching this: Stanford, Harvard, UC San Diego, Purdue, NYU, Johns Hopkins, Columbia University, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and in our own backyard, OHSU. For those who don't know, psilocybin was being researched back in the 50s and 60s, then banned in the 70s and shelved. Dare I say it, the government actually lied to us. It wasn't that harmful. It wasn't harmful at all. Psilocybin has been used for thousands of years for medicinal purposes and in religious ceremonies. In talking to those who have gone through guided sessions, they've said having this experience was the most spiritual and meaningful experience of their lives. Others have noted it was in equal importance to the birth of their child or getting married, or it was like 6 years of therapy in 6 hours. I'm not here advocating drug use. Sandy got it right to keep marijuana shops out of here. I could, under the current circumstances, with trained therapists, a lot of good could come from making this available. Over 60% of this state voted to adopt allowing this into the medical community, and I don't see why we're not listening to the community's voices. I ask you to think of those in your life who have struggled with PTSD, addiction, anxiety, depression, or who have suffered abuse. Do you want to be part of the solution? Therapists will have to go through 120 hours prior to becoming certified. They also go through an extensive vetting process.
20 seconds.
And the average cost to getting certified is over $10,000. If this council would be willing to hear from therapists that see this as being a good thing, I can set it up so that therapists can come and present an actual proposal to you or a presentation, not just to this board, but to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Copy?
Thank you.
Perhaps include a phone number or address, but Impact Learning is my business, and
I'll put it in the minutes.
You can have it sent it to you.
Thank you. Chris.
Hello, Chris Jones, 19,000 Southeast Bornstead Road. I would like to say on behalf of the Sandy Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank you all for who participated in our candidates video forum last week. It was great to have you guys come and be able to do that. I wanted to let you know we will be releasing that this week, so watch for that. Just wanted to let you know the date on that. And also just wanted to do a reminder about the Trick or Treat Trail. It'll be October 29th from 2 to 4 in the downtown core area. We are hoping to be able to do an online app this time for the maps and not have to print 800 copies of the map, that majority of them get thrown away. So we're trying to do the right thing by getting that all set up.
Follow the monsters.
Right, right. That's,
What's the timing on that?
it's from 2 to 4, yeah, on the 29th. So that's all I had tonight.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, moving ahead in our agenda, response to previous public comments. Jordan.
Thanks, Mayor. We did have a comment from Mr. Carter about concerns along Vista Loop and parking and visibility and clearance along there. Public Works will be looping out there to do some trimming and look at the site visibility and road safety there. But just wanted to follow up on that one comment. I think the rest were.
Public hearing, we're in the public hearing. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So related to the testimony on the, and I can't even say it, what used to be known as the magic mushroom.
Oh, sure.
Psilocybin.
Yeah.
Thank you. I should be more educated on this. Refresh my memory, but when we passed that ordinance and we not reserve, but my understanding is we still have the right to repeal it as a council or to change it or modify it as a council. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah.
So, but if we didn't do it at that time, we would basically forego the opportunity to have a local direction as to how we would choose to introduce it and when. Is that correct?
Yes, there's sort of a very expedited timeline.
Right, the
What about-
legislature, they gave us a short window
Yeah.
to opt out. But by opting out, we have the choice of when and if to allow more than we would have otherwise, correct?
I think that's probably
Yeah.
the right way to put it. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's an important thing. Just for myself, I am excited about the opportunities that this new promising drug has for us. So
Can I ask a question on that same thing?
Sure.
On that same basis, and I don't need an answer now, but I think what confuses me is the idea that, it's just like a pot shop where anybody can just walk in, buy it, use it, whatever. And that's what I assumed I assume that's what we were voting on, is that you would have that kind of access to it. And so I guess if it was going to be, I think what I said originally was that, in a clinical setting, I could see the benefits, but I wasn't up with, just being able to go down and buy it at the corner and pop it.
You still don't need a prescription.
So what this gives us, though, is an opportunity as a council, instead of the state legislator dictating what we have to do, we get to thoughtfully consider it
exactly right.
and come up with the appropriate how and when and so forth. And to that end, I welcome, as the science moves on, we should talk.
And to say one thing, thank you. This Wednesday, the state is holding an all-day seminar on how they plan to roll this out. So all you have to do is type in psilocybin, Oregon, and it's an all-day seminar. It's totally free. It's for people that are looking to not only grow mushrooms, but it's also looking at people that were therapists that would have to go through this training. My worry would be the same. I don't want this on every corner, just like I wouldn't want a pot shop on every corner. And they blew it. So they don't want to repeat those same mistakes. And so if you want more information, there's a little bit of stuff on the bottom of the handout I gave you, videos to watch that take an hour at a time. I think it's worth it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, yep. All right, moving ahead to presentations, development, code clear and objective audit information. Jordan.
Thank you, Mayor. I will quickly hand this off to Kathy Corliss and Kate Rogers from MIG with just one brief portion of the introduction here. If you remember, this was a project that the council approved the contract, I think in April, to do this clear and objective code audit. And if you go further back, we had that joint work session with the Planning Commission about a year and change to discuss priorities for doing some code amendments. And we were tackling the code updates with clear and objective standards, both in-house, but also came back to council with this proposal to contract to do a full audit an update of our development code to make it more, or make it clear and objective, to avoid some of the issues that we've had in the recent past, given changes in state law and regulations, particularly on land use and needed housing. So that project is underway, managed by Kelly and his team in planning. And so Kathy and Kate are here tonight to brief the council on the status of the project and where they're at, and the schedule going forward. Kathy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Kathy Corliss. I'm a principal with MIG APG, and we have a presentation. It's brief, and then of course your questions will be welcome. So Kate's next slide would be great. Thank you. So tonight it's myself, Kathy Corliss, and Kate Rogers. I am a principal and project manager with now MIG, formerly with Angelo Planning Group. And we have recently, as of February, merged with MIG. But my experience goes back more than 25 years in Oregon doing similar projects, doing code updates and audits in Oregon and some in Washington as well. And then Kate is a senior planner. She's been working with me for more than 7 years, or not directly with me for 7 years, but for 4 years with me on code projects. And also Brandon Crawford is supporting us. He's not with us tonight, but he's another key member of the team working with us on this project. And so Kate and I have been working on similar kind of clear and objective standards projects for the cities of cities of Hillsborough, Albany, Westland, as well as other code projects. Brandon and I and Kate have also worked together on a bunch of housing updates and similar code projects related to implementation of housing requirements and so forth. So I think we have a really solid team for this project, and we've been working with the city's staff as well. So I thought I would have Kate talk to you a little bit about the purpose of the project and what we're hoping to accomplish, and then we'll discuss the schedule and the tasks that are in front of us, and when we hope to be back in front of you with more substantive comments. Thank you, Kate.
All right, thanks, Kathy, and good evening, everyone. So it sounds like you all have been kind of briefed on the purpose of this project already, but just a little reminder about what we're doing. So the main purpose is to ensure that the Sandy Development Code is consistent with Oregon state laws and legislation. And so we're looking at kind of a variety of recent legislation related to housing and shelter that was passed within the last couple of years. But the main focus is on the clear and objective requirements in ORS 197307. And so that state statute requires that local governments adopt and apply only clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures for the development of housing. So we'll talk about what that means more specifically in a minute, but I'll mention that there are a couple of exceptions for historic districts. So cities are allowed to retain some discretionary procedures and regulations within designated historic districts. But that's kind of it. Otherwise, there has to be a clear and objective path for housing that kind of extends across the development code and in other documents that the development code references as well. And in addition to being clear and objective, regulations also cannot discourage needed housing through unreasonable costs or delay. So the regulations can't be so onerous that it adds an unreasonable amount of cost or time to a development project.
We have
Kate,
a question here.
Quick
Kate.
question.
Sure, yeah.
I'm assuming that the historic designations had to have been grandfathered in or vested at some point, and you can't just go through and redesignate it, or what are the requirements of designating a historic district? Can it be an entire city?
Historic Sandy.
Right.
Kate, I can answer that.
Okay.
So there's a statewide planning goal 5 that outlines a process for designating historic resources. And so, yeah, you can't, I suppose in theory, one could designate the whole city, but I don't think it would qualify. It's quite a rigorous process to designate historic resources. And so, and it needs to be through that process that you create those historic districts and areas.
Well, the one thing, and I'll go to your question here in a second. The one thing I would say though is as much as I said that in jest, I mean, there are some original pioneer homes and stuff in this community that, I don't know, I mean, with the, I don't know, just to be under consideration. Yeah, definitely.
Can you go to the slide before real quick?
Sure.
So the last bullet point there, I'm just kind of curious, what is considered unreasonable cost or delay? And can you put that in clear and objective standards? Irony there of, that, you know, what's unreasonable, not being clear and objective is kind of a funny thing for me. But if you could kind of just clarify what is considered unreasonable cost or delay.
That's a really good question. And Kathy might have something to add to this, but yeah, you're right. That is not at all a clear and objective state requirement. And that's the kind of thing that's really kind of tested through the court system. So, you know, if a city applies regulations that an applicant deems to be unreasonable in that way, you know, they could challenge that requirement, and it would, you know, potentially go all the way up to LUBA. And I think that's how those things kind of get worked out. But there's not a really straightforward means of deciding or determining whether regulations are, you know, discourage housing through unreasonable cost or delay.
Yeah, Kate's absolutely right. And it is a really good question. What we have seen LUBA say are things like, if the clear and objective path is so narrow, in other words, there's just almost no, the structure that can be built under those clear and objective standards is so limited that almost every project would have to go through the discretionary path. So if you were, and we'll talk about what it means to have a 2-track system, but if you craft that clear and objective track too narrowly, then and they've raised concerns with that, sent those kinds of regulations back to jurisdictions to change them and so forth. So, I mean, I think one needs to provide a reasonable, clear and objective path. And again, reasonable is not clear and objective, but it can't be crafted so narrowly that it is only feasible for, you know, 1 in 100 projects. Kind of thing. So, and there are some cases around that, and we'll be seeking, of course, the advice of your city attorney and reviewing the recommendations with legal counsel, make sure that, you know, the recommendations that we're giving you fit within kind of the city, you know, within the case law that's been established. So that is a part of the process.
Thank you.
Yeah. Those are great questions, though.
Anything else before we keep going? Okay. So clear and objective regulations, they use terms, definitions, and measurements that provide for consistent interpretation. So there's no ability or need for the reviewer to use any kind of discretion in applying the standards. So in other words, there's no gray area for interpretation. And as a result, you know, 2 people applying the same standard or regulation would get the same result every time. So that's kind of the intent or the overall idea. And there are kind of a range of kind of tools that that codes can use to apply clear and objective standards, things like measurements, you know, numeric regulations, kind of yes, no, either you have a front door that is oriented to the street and all of those terms are very clearly defined in the code, or you don't. So there's also kind of a menu-based approach where you provide some flexibility to the applicant by saying you have to, for example, provide, you know, 5 of these, the following 8 types of design features, for example. So that, you know, create some options for meeting the regulation in a couple different ways. And again, all of the terms that you use need to be very clearly defined so that, again, there's no room for interpretation. So kind of the benefit of this process, or this, this clear and objective path, is that, it can save time and money for the applicant. And I think that's kind of the general intent of the statute, is to facilitate development of housing. But it also creates some sort of, it sort of simplifies the process for staff. They aren't stuck with these kind of interpretation questions where they say, does this meet the standard or not? Ideally, it would be very clear whether an applicant, is meeting the standards. And it also creates some sort of certainty for the public if they see an application coming through and it's, following the clear and objective path. They know that it either is going to meet those requirements or it's not. So local governments also have the option of applying a discretionary review path or parallel track, as long as it's totally optional for the applicant. So as long as that clear and objective path is still there, there can also be this optional discretionary path. And so this could take the form of, as Kathy mentioned, a 2-track system. And this is especially common for things like design review standards and procedures. So you could have your clear and objective track that specifies, the criteria in ways that require no interpretation. And then you could also have this parallel discretionary track that is, sort of intending to achieve the same outcomes and has the same purpose. But in this case, the applicant would have to make the case for why their proposal is meeting all of the, the intent or the guidelines within that path. So that discretionary option can provide some more flexibility for the applicant if they have, sort of more creative ways or creative ideas for how they want to achieve the intent of the regulations, or if they have kind of unusual conditions on their site where it would be more difficult to meet the clear and objective standards. But then as sort of the trade-off, then the reviewer has a little more discretion in reviewing that application and sort of making decisions about it. So that's the gist of the project. That's what we're working on now. And I think Kathy is going to talk about the schedule next, but I just want to pause here really quickly and see if anyone has any questions about what we just talked about. And we'll also, save some time at the end for discussion.
We're good on our end.
Oh, awesome. All right.
Right. Well, you've seen the schedule. It was in the materials that we sent out. And so we've done a outline report of the audit, and then we had a very good meeting with the staff, and that was beyond just planning staff. We had folks from Parks and Public Works and the city's engineering firm participated. And so it was a very helpful meeting. We got some input from from others outside of just planning on sections of the existing code that prove challenging to implement because they have discretion or are otherwise difficult to work with. And so that was very helpful to get that kind of broader input. We have been working on a draft audit report. We've shared our initial findings with planning staff, and they're in the process of reviewing that. And we're, of course, here with you all for the city council briefing. And this was intended just as kind of a first introduction, mostly to meet Kate and myself and learn just a little bit more about this project. We don't have any substance to share with you yet, but we will be coming back to you soon with work sessions. We hope to do those in December and January, or perhaps sliding into January a little bit, depending on how the holidays fit within that schedule. And following that, then final report, and then back again for further meetings in a final version of that. So it's a long process, as you can imagine. It's very detailed work. So we're reviewing line by line the development code, highlighting areas that currently apply. And again, this is where the issue is with standards that apply to residential development. We talk about needed housing, but what has changed significantly in state law is that all housing is needed housing now. So regulations that apply to housing, development of housing, needing to be clear and objective. So going through, looking for those areas where that's not potentially the case right now, highlighting those, and then trying to think about what are ways to solve it that are policy neutral. And we are going to be trying very hard to not try and change the outcome for you. Our goal is to say, this is the outcome that you're getting today with the standards that you have in place. We'd like to deliver that same outcome as close as we can with clear and objective standards. So we are trying, this is not the opportunity for the public to come and say, oh, but we've always wanted to allow this use in this zone, or otherwise change outcomes, change heights, change setbacks. This project isn't necessarily about those kind of changes. It's converting the standards where they are not maybe as clear and objective as they could be today, to make them more clear and objective, to make them as clear and objective as possible. Again, we're going to be working with the city attorney's office, getting advice there, working very closely with your planners and your other city staff. So that's the project and the schedule very generally. Are there any questions about that?
Yeah, Councilor Exner.
Yeah, I have a question. In terms of, go back to your previous slide with all the, there you go. Looks like we're approximately halfway, maybe a little less, but approximately halfway. And I don't see any examples of some of the things that you're looking at changing, some of the specific items that might be of explanation about where we're heading for. And I have a concern that if we wait until the very end of the project of your evaluation, that we may not be able to have a chance to kind of look at what that looks like until the very end, when we have much less ability to discuss and maybe even modify as we go through. And I'm concerned that there should be more of examples. And you described vaguely what kind of things you were looking at, but I guess I would love to see something more earlier on in the analysis that you're doing that says this is the kind of corrections we're making and how that looks in terms of our code.
Okay, yeah, that's a great suggestion. And of course, we'll work with your planning staff to identify some of those examples earlier and make sure if that would be helpful to you all. I'm sure we can do that. I don't know that we would have the solutions crafted yet, but we could give you some examples of the areas of the code that we've identified. But yeah, again, we want to make sure we're pointing out things that the full team is in concurrence with as far as areas of concern. And then again, getting the involvement of the city attorney and so forth. So I think it should be no problem to get you something sooner rather than later. And I can understand your interest in seeing that. We'll certainly do what we can to help facilitate that.
It didn't need to be a perfect solution or complete, but it certainly would help to have something that gives me an idea about where you're headed, how you are straightening up some of these not clear items. And quite frankly, we were just reading this ORS 197 and thinking to myself, that's very clear as it is. That's very complex, very bureaucratic language. And so.
Yes, yeah, it really is. And this, again, our goal is to make corrections without necessarily making substantive changes to the standards that are, again, things like height, setbacks, allowed uses, trying to keep those, this is not an opportunity to change those things, but you're right, as you change, for example, a design standard that maybe says applicants should consider the context of the site when orienting the building, right? That's not your code, I just made that up. I mean, changing that to say specifically, if you're going to apply that in a clear and objective way, how would you rewrite something like that? Well, the building has to be oriented to the front setback. It can be, this distance from it, that kind of thing. So it's those kinds of changes. But again, we can bring you some examples of areas of code if that would be helpful. I think let me work with your planning staff to think about when we could be back in front of you with some earlier examples.
Sound like you've got it. So thank you.
And I would just add one thing, which is that you point out that the way, the statutes are written, it's not you wouldn't necessarily know what meets the criteria of clear and objective or not. And I will say that that recent case law has clarified that to some extent. It's definitely still evolving as, new cases are brought forward. I think we've kind of learned more and more about how broad the scope of these requirements are and how exactly they apply. So that has helped us understand how this is supposed to work better, but it's certainly sort of an evolving area and will continue to evolve.
Yeah, Counselor.
What is the nature of the actual deliverable that will come to us? Will it be strengths and weaknesses of our existing code, or will it also include actual suggested or proposed code changes?
The latter.
Okay, and the second part of that question then is, there's nothing on the schedule that talks about the adoption. Are you involved through the adoption of those code changes, or just for the proposal of the code changes? When does your contract scope end?
Yeah, we will be meeting with you at the end. We don't have the scope to see if there's an extended series of hearings. We don't have this necessarily within our scope to do that, but your city staff would be able to see that's through. So, I mean, we do have meetings. We are available for meetings with you. We're available for meetings, of course, as you need us, above and beyond the scope of work, and we can amend the scope of work as necessary to include the support that you need to make sure that you're comfortable. But I'm confident that by the time we get through the final report and the final meetings, your staff would be able to see that through if that's necessary. But if you'd like us there, of course, we could make that happen as well.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for all the work.
Our pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
having us here. We appreciate the opportunity.
All right, wonderful. With that, we'll move forward to our consent agenda. We have our city council meeting minutes from our October 3rd, 2022 meeting. Unless there's discussion, I'll entertain a motion for adoption.
Make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda.
For a second,
I'll second it.
there's a motion by Counselor Peatsold, a second by Counselor Walker to adopt the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up. Aye. Opposed, nays, or a thumbs down. Motion carries. Moving forward to resolutions, CWSRF Construction Loan Amendment number 2. Welcome, Jenny. Jordan.
Jenny.
Or just Jenny. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I do need some procedural help about the resolution. Do I do the staff report first?
Yeah, there's no public hearing for this one.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, the decision to be made tonight is whether to adopt resolution 2022-25, authorizing amendment number 2 to the Clean Water SRF loan, which is what we're using to fund all our work on the Sandy Clean Waters program. In terms of background, this resolution authorizes the amendment to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund which is administered through the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. The current Phase 1A loan provides financing for the work at the wastewater treatment plant, as well as the work in the collection system, which is reducing the rainfall-derived I&I improvements. And this amendment increases the loan by $4.7 million to an updated total loan amount of $20,700,000. The amendment covers increased project costs that all these projects have accrued due to pandemic-related construction delays, extensions, as well as inflated costs, as well as a number of condition-related improvements that were found necessary at the time of construction, including the emergency repair to the Strawbridge Parkway sinkhole. The loan has a low interest rate of 1.22%, making this funding source preferable over regular market rate loans. And the resolution is attached. The recommendation is to adopt the resolution, and the budgetary impact This will increase the CWSRF loan funding to the Sandy Clean Waters Program Phase 1A by 4.7 million to an updated total loan amount of 20,700,000. And this has been accounted for all along these many months in the program budget. If I could expand on that, I did get a couple of questions before the meeting today. And so one of the questions was just trying to understand in more detail what percentages were due to additional scope increases versus inflation that caused price increases to pipes or equipment, as well as contract extensions. And I do have those numbers. So, and you have to remember, this is both construction at the wastewater treatment plant, as well as basins 2 and 8, which are funded through these sources. So additional scope was about 50% of that. These are things that we hadn't planned to include or discovered were in worse condition than we thought. And once we were in there, we had to repair them. And everyone's seen the updates on the construction prices. You know, at the time of bid, you know, in October, in an estimate, something was X amount, and then it goes up, you know, the average has been 30%. So the inflation cost of this amendment is 40%. A number of the contracts, mostly due to the additional work they've been asked, have been extended. And so for each month that something's extended, there is an administrative cost to that. Preparing the loan amendments, preparing the documentation. That's a fairly small amount. It's 6%. And then we also have a very small buffer in there of contingency that's unallocated for just anything else that comes up, and that's 4% of the cost. So I should have included that in the breakdown. And then there was also a question of how are we managing these contracts? Are we holding the contractors accountable? And so I wanted to give just a little brief amount. Right now, our goal is to kind of update and fix our system as quickly as possible. So schedule is priority. And right now, these are not low bid contracts. These are qualification-based selections. And so we've selected these contractors, Oxbow and Sladen, based on their qualifications, and then they work together with the engineer and we get a guaranteed maximum price. But that guaranteed maximum price is linked to a scope. So if there are things outside of the scope, like we want this addition, that is a change order. And we don't agree to that GMP until the design is complete. And so, these contractors are in a situation where this pipe costs this much and 4 months later, this is what it costs. And so we are managing these to the degree we are able. Many contractors do have force majeure contracts because of supply chain disruptions. And so where we can, we are holding people to the contracts. But for the most part, this is a very difficult, very expensive time to build. And we're just doing our best to work with people.
So I hear all of that, but it does feel like we are continually returning to the same contractors repeatedly, and that there's less and less bids for our contracts as we move forward. And so, I understand that none of these are, forced low bid contracts, but I guess I do get concerned that we keep returning to the supply chain, inflation, the world. We could blame we could keep going down that path every time. And I just want to make sure that we are at least that we continue to do our due diligence to make sure that we are appealing for multiple bids. When I say appealing, that that construction firms out there view us as a reasonable place to put their time and effort and staff to bid for our job because they think that they have a potential opportunity of getting it.
And I would say we do. And to answer that, we have, in terms of wastewater, we only have 3 contracts that we've put out to bid. Basins 2 and 8 went out, and that was Oxbow. We did go through a selection process for basins 6 and 7, and we did have multiple contractors. Oxbow did win that again, based on having experience here, but that selection was open and we did have multiple bids. the wastewater treatment plant has been the same contractor this whole time.
Mhm.
And so these are, once you have a contractor on site,
Same contractor and contract, or different contracts, same contractor? For the treatment plant.
sorry, I'm not sure what I've said. We've only had one construction contract at the
That's
treatment
the-
plant
so
right
one
now.
contractor,
Three
one-
GMPs.
One contract.
3 GMPs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to come.
And I need to explain the GMPs as well. The way this project was structured, they thought they would do 3 design packages, put together a package, contractor goes out and gets bids, it gets evaluated. This is a very normal process. Because of what they saw with the delays and because of our compliance date of October 31st, they put in more effort. And I believe they did more equipment packages because the goal was schedule. And that did cause additional work, which we have already approved for the design engineer, West Yost, as well as Leeway. And this was all done to try and manage this very unusual year. So I hear what everyone's saying, and I just wanted to explain and give more context to that. Keep going.
Yeah, and we can all, and we can all say all we want, me included, but we made a lot of decisions for time.
We did, and there was a cost
to
to that.
expedite, and that's just
Yeah.
true.
The
Yeah.
Holy
So,
Triangle, scope, schedule, budget. What do you want?
Totally, yeah.
If I could just expand a little bit, there's more to come with this, like I said, with this project and the water project. And so project delivery methods will be, I think, a huge topic as we proceed and have a program manager on board and getting that analysis and their recommendations too on how we structure contracts going forward. A couple of things I just wanted to touch on too, as far as this item in particular, the SRF amendment, a lot of this amendment is already baked into contracts the council has approved already. I think the rate model reflects that we were going to amend the SRF loan. This was the cheapest money that we can get to fund these projects. I think you see the schedule when that debt service starts to hit in the next biennium. So when you get questions about why we're increasing rates, it's because, the only way to fund these projects is to debt finance them, and that debt hits. And in order to prepare for that hit, we need to raise rates to get to the point where we can afford to pay that debt service. And then we were able to talk to DEQ about the SRF loan and include the Strawbridge Parkway. Remember when we did that emergency fix, originally we talked about using ARPA and just using cash. Well, at 1.22% or whatever it is, this is really cheap money to be able to fund that project and include it in this amendment. That kind of helps our stormwater fund, as you recall, and have that portion of this loan being paid out of the stormwater fund to repay that project. So we felt like that was a more financially responsible way to pay for that repair.
Questions?
Yeah, please do.
I'm gonna just jump in here.
Well, hold on, Jeremy had a quick
Oh,
question.
okay, sorry. I didn't hear.
Sorry, I'll speak up. With this, in the financing, and you brought up the rates going up and that type of thing. With these, the loans that we got here, with what we did here at the last meeting and put the moratorium on, it has a positive side and a negative side of that. One, the positive side in the fact that they're not putting more sewage treatment water or in that pipe and going down there to be dealt with. But the negative side of it is we have that 3-legged stool of how we were going to pay for all this. So how does in that, and it was a short time and hopefully it will come out of it before anything trickles down, but to where we were missing out on some of the building of that one of the legs of the stool, right? We had the ratepayers paying, we have the SDCs that come in to help with it. And then we have, the future growth of building permits and additional ratepayers that are coming on board. Have we thought about that in our really smart numbers guy that's come to present to us? And, have we contacted them to reanalyze, or is that just too soon in the model to see, are we going to have to raise our rates to our ratepayers sooner or higher because one of the legs of the stool is a little shorter now?
Do you want me to answer?
I can.
I hear what you're saying. Based on the information we know, they look at average growth. Well, we do have a pause. We do expect after the stress test, it'll reveal capacity and there won't be an interruption to the average connections. I am exploring a path B that would pay off this loan and defer repayment for 5 years, depending on projections, and balancing that out by taking out additional SRF money, which we applied for in August, which is also lower interest rate, but more of it. I don't know if you followed all of that, but we're exploring multiple options, depending on kind of a sensitivity of where we land. You want to?
So a couple things in the rate model. One, we made the kind of the policy choice, which I think most cities do, of not over relying upon SDCs as a constant revenue, stable revenue source to be able to do our debt coverage ratio. For these exact reasons, it could be cyclical. We can hit a recession. There's so many things out of our control that we don't want to put too much into that bucket, saying we're going to always have $500,000 SDC revenue come in every year. So we've already kind of hedged our bets on that in the rate model. And then, as we talked about the last meeting with the moratorium, with the 120 connections to accommodate all those that are already vested in under construction, that will hopefully keep our building permits and SDC revenue collections stable for this 6 to 9 month period. And then we have additional vested rights are in the pipeline. And then beyond that, nobody really has a crystal ball of what this kind of, the economy, but also having a moratorium, in terms of projects in the pipeline and things could do for the SDC collections. But yeah, we've had these conversations with the rate model consultants, and we'll continue to factor that in the best way we can.
So what I hear is we'll find out next April, May, how we're doing on our stress test to see if we need to recalculate rate model planning for the future, depending on how that turns out.
I've requested a rate model recalculation just last week.
Okay.
Based on this new concept of using WIFIA to pay off this loan and defer the repayments. Well, we also applied for and were initially accepted for another $46 million SRF loan, which is at a lower interest rate than WIFIA quite substantially. So it helps overall lower the rates and also could help defer some of the payments. But we're exploring it right now, but we are thinking about that.
Thanks.
Great. Carl, do you still want to jump in there?
Yeah, just real quickly, estimated we get done at 8 o'clock tonight. Doesn't look like I'm going to.
Well, we still can. We still can.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we still can.
So in the city has a cap about how much debt we can take on to be able to not get to a point where we can't do our own payments and stuff. And I guess I'm curious about how close we are to that point. I know you're doing it. You just described a way to make less debt payments and so on, but how close are we to that limit with all this money that we're spending? $20 million on the wastewater treatment plant and all the other things that we have coming down the tube. How close do we get to that point where we are at the maximum of our debt load?
I don't know. I would have to defer to Tyler.
Okay.
But
Well,
which is okay. I think we just need to be aware that that's something that in the back of my mind, I don't want to get us so close to the debt limit that we can't
I think
feel comfortable about taking on other projects.
I don't know if there's an actual city policy on debt outside of what is state statute. You can't exceed, I think, 3% of real market value that's in the city. And that's for general obligation debt. On the utility side, I don't think the city has a policy on.
Right. Okay.
And we've had conversations about the EPA's affordability criteria and how much debt on both the water and wastewater individually and combined. And that is something that we are factoring and, is affecting our project and how we're exploring alternatives with the wastewater, especially on the wastewater side. Tyler, anything?
I see Tyler there. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jordan. That 3% limit is for general obligation bonds, and the sewer debt is backed by the sewer revenue. So as long as we are collecting money from ratepayers, we will be able to meet our debt service requirements. So no issue there.
Just want to point out, right, I think I'm right on this, that this is a finance motion that's, or a resolution that's pending. I mean, these contracts that it's paying for are already cut. We've already debated them. They're out there. We have to pay for them. If we don't do this, we'll pay for them with higher interest rate money. And that's really what this comes down to, right?
Yes.
Okay. So can I make a motion?
Do it.
Anybody? Okay. I move to adopt resolution 2022-25.
A second. That.
Motion by Counselor Hokinson, the second by Counselor Peatsold. All those in favor signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, or a thumbs down. Motion carries. All right, moving to new business, owners rep services contract amendment number 3 for Leeway Engineering Solutions.
All right. So for background, at the March 15th, 2021 meeting, City Council authorized the city manager to sign an agreement with Leeway Engineering Solutions for owners rep services on phase 1A of the Clean Waters Program. The fee for the required services then was $242,735. This contract was then amended per the following. Amendment 1 dated January 2022 extended the contract by 10 months. Assumed completion October 2022 for $369,873, followed by Amendment 2 dated April of 2022, added the subconsultant water dude and effort for Leeway to oversee the subconsultant contract for $152,681. So for analysis, key considerations, Amendment 3 will provide continuing owners representative services and covers the following additional services. Extended project schedule. The amendment will extend services for 8 months from October 22 through June 2023. It's been known that we need this amendment and this extension to cover this service since last spring, actually, but with the ever-changing loan interest rates and other things, we did wait to bring this amendment to you until things, the picture was more clear. It makes sense to keep Leeway on through the completion of Basin 6 and 7 rehab, as well as the stress test, which will occur in the spring, then be written up and negotiated in June. Just to give a little bit more context in this. Leeway Engineering will provide services for overseeing the facility plan amendment, which was newly conceived, based on discoveries last spring. The stress testing, which is a really, really large effort, and additional collection system infiltration and inflow reduction projects that will extend into the first half of 2023. That's Basin 6 and 7, as well as CMOM and some other collection system reduction projects. Additional requested ongoing services. Managing information requests and supporting continuing negotiations with the United States Department of Justice and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, planning and initiating future phases of the collection system elements, and overseeing the American Rescue Plan Act funding requirements and applying for additional funding sources. And that has been a really big effort. These are requests for engineering, additional verification, which have added up to quite a lot and have been billed to their existing contract. And we have been tracking them for some time, especially these requests for more data, more analysis, as we've gone through these negotiations, as well as the ARPA grant, the 14.7 million. There's an effort required in preparing the compliance documents so we can use those funding. And as well as with the interest rates that went up the last couple of months, we quickly pivoted to apply for another SRF loan for $46 million because we knew that those interest rates were much more attractive than WIFIA. And that was an additional effort that they prepared in July with only a couple weeks notice to get that application in. Additional contract scope expands the contract scope to include upcoming new requirements, including but not limited to overseeing the facility plan amendment. And this also includes additional studies that DEQ and EPA would like to see in that facility plan amendment, which we're still discussing. Overseeing coordination of the stress testing, execution of additional regulatory requirements such as the capacity management, operations and maintenance program. The requested amendment for owner's representative support totals $883,779, and the proposal is attached. The recommendation is to authorize the city manager to sign Amendment 3 for the owner's representative amendment with Leeway Engineering Solutions. The proposed amendment, again, which totals $883,779, is funded by the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the American Rescue Plan Act. And this has been planned for in the program budget as we've been putting this together. And in addition, I wanted to add, they have also brought in the new consultants that won and proposed on our program management services. They're a national firm that has a lot of expertise with design management, and they're going to bring a lot to the team as we develop our facility plan amendment and our strategy moving forward, as well as bringing them to the table for continued negotiations with DEQ. So the
With the recommendation.
No, you're good. All right. Any questions or pretty straightforward for a motion?
I have
Go
one
ahead.
quick question.
Yep.
So who's doing the actual facility plan amendment?
We have not brought that contract to council, but it's a different design firm. Kennedy Jenks was, we issued the notice of intent to award.
Okay, and so, and that's an additional cost. And so these people, and so you mentioned, you know, obviously Leeway, but also another firm is also involved in overseeing that. I mean, it just seems like there's so many
Yes.
folks involved, different, you know, companies involved in overseeing other companies. And it's, you know, I love it when all the money goes to actually get things, you know, fixed on the ground, all this stuff. And I realize that, you know, you need to have these people in place doing things, because whenever you get this money, it's not free. It takes a huge amount of paperwork and red tape to cut through, and red tape cutters are paid at a premium. So I get all that. I'm just trying to keep track of the layers, I guess. And can, you know, have we been as efficient as we can to try to cut through any of the layers that we can?
Well, I really appreciate these questions, and we do have a lot of consultants working for us, but we also have a very complicated situation, and we also have a lot of time and ground to make up for. And we do need a lot of experts, and we are also, we're very thinly staffed for this amount of work, and you know, these also function as staff extension. I mean, it would be impossible for us as we're staff to apply for these loans, apply for these grants, administer them, meet with DEQ to the frequency we are. I mean, there's a substantial amount of data validation that we have to do. Rainfall gauges, monitoring, weekly updates, and these are requirements that this firm is doing. The other thing that we're doing with Stantec is, with this amendment, we're able to bring them on several months earlier than we planned to. And there's a small amount, and we may not use all of it, but we can now bring in, just as we did with Water Dude, just some more people to the team who really are experts at permitting, and especially wastewater treatment, because Leeway is really known for the collection system, and it's a different skill set to apply and administer the loans, and it's a different skill set to run the program, coordinate, and document. Stantec is going to bring a lot more design management, and especially with the 3-basin rule and permitting, they're just,
But they're
it's
in
just a
here too.
partnership.
The Stantec is included in this 800,000?
Yes,
Okay.
I asked to bring them in, just have some
And
access
it
to
says
them
Leeway,
early.
and that's where I was.
Well, to be clear, there will be a follow-up program manager contract in the future.
For phase 1B.
For phase 1B. We're bringing Stantec early kind of as a phase in, phase out of an owner's rep to a program manager.
Yes.
So this will carry us through phase 1A with leeway, but having this kind of overlap with a new program manager then that will transition to for both the water and wastewater. And I hear your concern, like there is a lot of money going towards consultants, engineer firms, project management, but we're talking $180 million of capital projects going out the door in the next 5 years in the city of Sandy. And if you add up how much of that is construction versus project management, engineering, I think the percent is probably within those, safe areas of what you would expect. And Jenny's right. We now have 2 engineers on staff, which is great. But typically you'd have many more handling that amount of work in that time frame for capital projects.
So my last question is, do you see us having the same kind of almost $1 million a year cost, going forward the next 5 years for these services?
It'll be more because we're going to be increasing between the engineering and the program and owner's rep project management, but this has all been budgeted in the program.
All right.
It's a lot of work, needs a lot of bodies. And, we're not going to be in this mode for many years. And this year, I think, is especially challenging because we're trying to lock in the best interest rates we can. And so there's been a lot of pivoting. Like when we started this job, we didn't expect to be going into a facility plan amendment. So, there's a lot of plates spinning right now.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just gonna say, this is different than our other contracts in that it is an owner's rep. So to her point of staff augmentation, that is not just staff augmentation, but bringing expertise and leadership and the management that we didn't hire, can't acquire. This particular amendment includes 4,400, almost 4,400 hours of labor itemized on the final. I'm ready to make a motion if we can. Okay. I move that we move the motion up to the top. I move to authorize the city manager to sign amendment number 3 to the owner's representative agreement with Leeway Engineering Solutions in the amount of $883,779.
For a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Hokinson, a second by Counselor Smallwood. I'm taking it. I'll give it to you, Smallwood. All those in favor signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up. Aye. Opposed nays or a thumbs down. Motion carries. All right, SandyNet enroll. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you.
SandyNet enrollment and affordability connectivity program.
Greg Brewster's
there
joining
he
us.
is.
Yep.
Greg Brewster on the screen.
There he is.
Welcome,
He's at a
sir.
conference right now, I believe.
He should be popping up next once he starts talking.
Yeah, hopefully you can see me and hear me all right.
Yep.
Okay, I am from my hotel room at the moment here, so the Wi-Fi is all right, but if it gets spotty or choppy, someone give me a signal. And as I'm going through this here, in the past, I don't, when you guys speak, I don't always hear it back here, so I will try to take pauses every so often, ask for if there's any questions, but Jeff can also mute me and talk over if we need to here. So I'll go ahead and jump right in, and I'll try to be quick. It's like 4 pages, but a lot of it can be summarized. It's just a lot of supporting information for this. So the decision that I'm asking to be made here tonight is to determine whether or not SandyNet should enroll and participate in the Affordability Connectivity Program provided by the FCC to offer a low-income broadband plan for qualifying households for SandyNet. And a lot of the kind of background is that the ACP, which is the Affordability Connected Plan, came about last year and was rolled over from an existing program by the FCC called the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which is the EBB, which was released during COVID as a way to get broadband into homes as people started working from home, as there was distance learning, telehealth, and those that didn't have to have broadband before that were able to go to public places that no longer could, or now found themselves at home having to remote into school and didn't have a broadband connection and couldn't afford it. This program aimed at those that qualified to give them broadband support and reimburse the service provider via the FCC there. So it was part of emergency COVID funds to fund it during COVID, and those funds started drying up last year, and the FCC kind of drafted ACP, which was the continuation of this program of the EBB, and then modified it to try to make it more stabilized and also future-proof to kind of make it a permanent program underneath the FCC and USAC. And so that did roll over, and we had looked at enrolling in the EBB back when in 2020, but we ultimately decided against it as a service provider. It had some risks that were a lot of service providers were kind of shying away from it because they didn't quite know if it was going to change or if the requirements were overburdening the service providers. There was a lot of talk, and it was kind of rolled out in a fashion that there was a lot of unknowns at the time. But since then, since it's been solidified in ACP, a lot of those risks have been mitigated or taken care of, or kind of discovered that the burden was not as much. And a lot of service providers are now jumping on and taking on ACP as kind of a permanent or semi-permanent solution, as I'll kind of get into. The ACP qualifiers get a $30 discount back to the ISP gets a $30 discount, and the customer can pay the difference. However, the FCC does incentivize providers to provide a free tier, which is what would be a $30 plan, and then the customer doesn't have to pay. And a lot of providers go that route. A lot of cable and phone providers offer that. I know Comcast offers a really slow speed plan. I will touch on that a little bit later here, but that is something they try to sway people and providers to offer that plan there, but it's not a requirement. So the ACP program is actually pretty broad in terms of what qualifying programs allow households to be enrolled. And the FCC goes to great lengths in their documents to explain how it reduces duplication since it's based on the household, not the individual. So if someone in the household meets any of the criteria for qualifying for ACP, the household is immediately covered, and only one household can be enrolled within ACP, which means you can't have multiple providers enrolling in ACP and have multiple connections. And I'll go through a couple of the programs here, but there's a handful of them there, as you'll see in the staff report. The big one is that if a household is at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, if they are on certain rate assistance programs, SNAP, Medicaid, federal public housing, WIC, Lifeline, if they participate in tribal specific programs, if they participate in the reduced school lunch program, or if they've received a federal Pell Grant during an awarded year. And so the final background piece to kind of provide context here is back in November of 2021, City Council did set aside American Rescue Plan dollars to SandyNet to continue to build out and service some of the remaining underserved areas in Sandy. And the final rule that came out from the Department of Treasury did emphasize the importance of providing a low-income subsidy program, and then provided two requirements: that the service provider participate in ACP, which had been established and ready to roll out, or provide a broadband-based affordability program that is very much like ACP. And those are about the requirements that they sent out for rate assistance, and finding additional details on what qualifies as being similar to ACP has been pretty difficult. So mostly almost identical in some ways, which is pretty difficult if you try to create your own rate assistance program. So the analysis of all this, our department's been working on trying to find a solution here for, well, ever since the ARPA funds were allocated to our department here. And once we saw that requirement, and we began trying to find a way to make a program work and explore as many options as possible to see which one would be the best or have the least amount of impact or risk on our department. I'll say ACP does have overhead. So when you participate in these programs and you get federal dollars, there will be some administrative overhead. And this was one of the big things that scared us away from the EBB at first, was we thought it was going to be more like the federal Lifeline program, which is for providing a phone line to those that don't have it at a reduced cost. And what happened with that is the Fed delegated that down to the state Public Utility Commission, which collected those funds and the enrollment and put a lot of the burden on the service provider here. Where the FCC changed that with the ACP is the FCC actually maintains the databases of who qualifies and will actually do the background sort of check and the adjudication for the actual participation. So if someone can qualify, the FCC controls all that piece and does all that. The only thing the provider has to really do is grab the ID that's assigned to that approved resident, reach out to the FCC and enroll them with them as a provider, and then do eligibility checks every year to keep up and make sure that they're still eligible and de-enroll people that are no longer eligible. And that in combination with USAC, with some of the other reporting fees on certain metrics, was kind of the extent of the overhead on the administrative side. There are some other pieces of community outreach. You have to be able to prominently display on your website or your marketing materials that you enrolled in ACP. You can't hide the fact that you are an enrolled provider to the public, and you have to make sure that it's easy for someone to enroll should they be able to qualify. And so sorry, was there a question?
We're good, Greg.
Okay, sorry. When our staff reviewed all these burdens and extra requirements, we kind of came to the conclusion after weighing them that it didn't have too much of a burden on our department that we had expected with the Lifeline program or the EBB. And so at this point, we say that it doesn't really provides a negligible impact on us. That definitely is notable, but not necessarily a cause for concern. Also, one of the big requirements for ACP was that you had to give a minimum of 90 days past due notice before you could shut a customer off. The city already does 60, so we're talking an extra 30 days there. It's just kind of a risk that staff once again said this is something that has to be, and that it's not going to be a deal breaker from what we see and what we've seen other providers implement this program also come up against. So just to reiterate, the FCC they don't care about what plans or speed tiers that you offer. So between our two tiers at 500 megs and gigabit for $44.95 and $59.95, $30 is reduced off of the customer's bill and then reimbursed via the FCC. So the customer for a 500 meg service ends up paying $15 a month to the city. The remainder is picked up by the FCC. And this can be applied to any program at any cost. And the FCC chose not to impose requirements or allow you to make special programs, and that you said you had to apply it to any and all existing programs that you have. And so for that price, it still comes out to be very affordable. And also the Fed doesn't cover things such as one-time installation fees, if you imposed rental fees or additional overage charges, things that the other providers might have. SEC discourages it and does not discourages the practice of service providers imposing those, first of all, but also will not reimburse the provider for any of those fees. It's only the recurring service charge of $30. And so finally, staff did go through the process of trying to come up with its own rate assistance program, one that was similar to what the sewer and water department currently offer, which is mainly based on income. And looking at the final rule, for us to be able to expand to a lot of these other programs that were offered, get access into them or provide a solution that was very similar, we weren't quite able to figure out exactly how we would ever get to that point. But even still, running the dollar amount and trying to come up with a dollar value that we would charge the customer or a reduced plan that would make it possible, we couldn't make the numbers work where it would cut into the service rate of the funds that we would collect. It would not recover for the operational costs and the build out costs for anybody and everybody. So we chose to we looked at ACP and saw it as a reimbursement versus us having to cut into operational revenue and accept things at a loss. So in every case and model that we built, the return on our investment was a lot larger at that time frame than using ACP which is almost identical, given except for the administrative overhead to our current rate model. So it fits nicely in there. And I've already talked about the EBB and why we didn't implement and go into it the first time. But a couple of numbers here, just to kind of, we also try to go out and get the perspective and see how many people are enrolling in ACP and how big of a program is it, so that we as a provider can kind of anticipate what kind of load of customers are going to partake in this service here. And looking at the most recent information from Clackamas County based on, we looked at zip code, but also Clackamas County as only 1.5% of households out of all the households in Clackamas County partake in ACP. And 40%, according to the White House in July, upwards of 40% of Americans technically can qualify for ACP. So in Clackamas County alone, that number is drastically lower. So there's people that are potentially eligible that are not partaking in the service. So that's something to keep in mind. I think the Clackamas County's number of 1.5% countywide is a good number that we could use since we are also within Clackamas County and given our current situation as well. Finally, SandyNet did reach out to MyNet, which is Monmouth Independence municipal work, and because they had enrolled in ACP and I believe EBB and got their take on the program, how their implementation went, what struggles they ran into, what their current take rate of it is. And they wrote back and said that they actually have less than 1% of their current customer base on the service, and they meet all the requirements and have been offering it for a number of months. And that they did also confirm that to enroll in ACP and do the reporting and all the overhead was not overburdening the provider itself. Finally, the last piece of asset that you do consider to mention here is that the SWSRF funds from the final rule from the Department of Treasury did state in the broadband requirements that you have to offer that program there. However, since the city did allocate its funds, I believe, as revenue recovery, it's unclear to me and the team that we technically have to meet those requirements with broadband. However, SandyNet has before the ARPA funds, first of all, and also during COVID and even before COVID, SandyNet has been looking at a rate assistance program to implement, since it's something that we've seen in the public, and drastically since COVID has increased in the amount of requests, and definitely there is a need for it. And we have lost out on customers because we have not been able to offer some form of program in the past there. So during COVID, we did reach out to see if we could join the Lifeline program to get some sort of subsidy. The burden to the provider was a lot. There was a lot of reporting working with the state, and during COVID, with how busy we were we couldn't take that project on, and so we had to shelf it. Same with the EBB. There was a lot of unknowns that we couldn't take the time to demystify and justify. But since ACP and how it's changed, we believe now, seeing other providers participate, even larger providers now, that it's stable enough, the risk has been reduced, and that beneficial now, as it proposes a valid solution for a low income rate assistance program. And so the last thing I would say is we have traditionally offered low revenue prices, I'll say, at the speed that we do offer, being kind of the one of the lower cost providers in town, and that's by design. And that's something that we definitely want to do, and it falls in line with the mission on how we want to operate here. And we believe that as prices do increase, there is still a piece that we may not be meeting within the community, as we're seeing now with these with the units that we're currently building out to. A lot of them are on programs, or a lot of rate programs that would qualify for a lot of these programs, and they can't necessarily pay the full amount. And so finding a solution that would work between the provider and the customer. And I've been working with the project management companies of all the ARPA sites here to figure out what would be a good solution. And staff has come to the conclusion that we believe ACP has minimal risk and would be the most beneficial solution for our entity to engage in. And so our recommendation is, after weighing options over the past couple of years, we determined that in its current state, ACP is an acceptable solution for a low-income program, and that staff has the confidence outlined in this report here that all of the outstanding risks and current unknowns are mitigated, and that we're not exposing ourselves to unnecessary risk, and that the advisory back in March actually did approve us to continue going down the ACP route when it became apparent that an in-house model was not viable. And so our recommendation, my recommendation here tonight is that staff respectfully request that City Council approve SandyNet to enroll and participate in the ACP program to offer low-income options to qualifying households.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. Very thorough, great analysis. Really appreciate you weighing these options for us. Are there any questions, or are we ready to move forward with such a strong recommendation from staff?
I have just one little question.
Okay.
I'm 100% for this. I thank you for all this information. It's going to be great. On the second page, third paragraph, last sentence, it says, this means that the provider must offer ACP enrollment to any households that are eligible, regardless of funding options / projects or service territory. Could you just kind of explain what that means? Like, if they're out of our service territory, we're not obligated to connect them, or just clarify for me. That'd be
correct.
Great.
Yeah. What I meant by that was, if we offered an in-house program, we could select just the ARPA sites for those that might be eligible for that program. If you enroll in ACP or any other federal program, you have to offer it to your entire customer base, which means it could be someone on fiber, it could be someone on wireless, it could be anybody that would qualify that's in that you can that you can service essentially there. So inside of our serving territories is maybe not the right word to use, but it definitely means that if they're on your network and they're eligible for it and you enroll in the program, you're obligated to give it to them.
Great, thank you.
All right. Perfect. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I want to just say thank you for all the time, Greg, for putting into this. I know I've been on that committee with you and have very thoughtfully done that. So in that, I like to make a motion that I had it right here and now I can't find. Approve SandyNet's enrollment and participation in the ACP program for low-income qualifying households.
Awesome. Is there a second? Perfect. There's a motion by Councilor Peatsold, a second by Councilor Walker. All those in favor signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Opposed, nays, or a thumbs down. Motion carries. Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Great work.
Really
Good work.
going to benefit a lot of folks.
All right. Moving forward, report, Jordan Wheeler.
Thank you, Mayor. Enjoyed the conference a couple of weeks ago. Thank you. It was great to have you all there, and hopefully found it beneficial. And just as a follow-up on that, I think Rochelle is assembling the RFP for our park improvements at the community campus. And I think being able to do the park tour there was pretty special to tour those parks with the council. Board and commission recruitment, get the word out. I think a lot of our boards and commissions have vacancies, budget committee, economic development, library. So we're seeking applicants for those boards. And so thanks for anything you can do to kind of get the word out. On our transportation system plan, we do have a survey out on helping get input on project priorities and also get any input on additional projects that should be identified in the system. Heads up, can get a little wonky with the kind of terminology of naming the projects and stuff, but I've found that if you have a couple windows open or tabs open, you can go back and forth and provide your priorities and comments that way. I did reach out to Nellie DeVries about helping us with lobbying government relations. She is very interested. And so I sent around to the committee that helped with the selection before her updated resume and letter. And I've already kind of presented that to council. So I'm happy to keep moving forward with that and get her on board to help us out going into the long session. And then just a brief moratorium update. It's been a couple weeks. We did have our first 4 ERUs pulled, which was anticipated with the Shaley Meadows development. That's ongoing construction. So that's our first 4 ERUs. I know Kelly's been meeting with developers and builders over the last couple of weeks, and the mayor and I met with the Home Builders Association. They asked us to come and present to their government affairs committee, which I actually think went pretty well. I think it helped share that information, kind of clarify some things. So that's where we're at with that. So that's it for me. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Done.
Wow, Jordan, just feel the air go. So yeah, the conference was great. Really enjoyed my time there. Learned a lot, which was cool because I actually went thinking I wouldn't have a good time and I wouldn't learn anything. So expectations exceeded.
Low bar.
Low bar.
Good
Exactly.
accomplishment.
Exactly. Fall's hit us really late this year. Just want to make sure that our street sweepering leaf plan is getting shifted appropriately so that when the real fall hits, we'll be ready.
Starting to, though. On my jog today, I was
It's
like,
starting.
holy smokes.
They're not
Crunch, crunch,
starting,
crunch,
they're
crunch.
just
Yeah.
dying. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
but yeah, the trees are giving up. And last, I'd love to get an update soon on Rochelle's vision and plan for Christmas. If that's still a thing that we're moving towards, I'd love to see that advertised and move forward quickly. Oh, there was one more last thing, and that is on this SandyNet ACP. If we're only getting a 1% take rate and there's a 20 or 30 or 40% eligibility, then whoever's offering it isn't doing a good job. We need to do a great job of publicizing that, pushing it through the Facebook, social media, and webpage and so forth. So anyway, make sure we can. Thank you.
Carl.
Nothing much, except that the art committee is not operating at the moment. With that, I'm gonna pass. You're kidding.
I attended the dedication of the new health center, and that was just amazing. I don't want to steal your thunder, so
No,
I'll
you're fine.
leave it, but I was impressed. I took a tour of it, and the dental, they have a dental clinic there, a pharmacy. I mean, it's really blows me out of the water how much services they're going to be offering there. Really cool. Report on the library liaison thing. The Hoodland Library kind of feels a little bit cheated because Oak Grove and Happy Valley, Clackamas County basically turned over to those libraries, brand new buildings almost, and said, here you go. And Hoodland is left paying rent in a shopping center. So they feel a little cheated, understandably. So I think Jordan is going to be working with them to kind of just make a presentation to the county about the possibility. Right now, their rent money comes out of their operating budget, which again is not really fair. So they're looking at working with Jordan to kind of just go to the county and make up if they do sell that property up there where they were thinking of having the park, perhaps some of that money can go towards either a different building or rent for the library or some other options. So I think Jordan's working on that area. And then I'm looking forward to the trick or treat trail.
I'm all confused. Lori, please.
No problem. So in regard to your question, Dawn, right now, what I know about the Christmas event with the parks in Mining Park, the trees will be lit after we light the tree in town, and people will be able to walk across and go through Mining Park. Their current plan is to have 4 nights over 4 weeks. So it'll be 1 night a week. And they'll have events and outreaches, and each night will have a different theme. They've got some pretty cool stuff planned, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder on that one. So pretty exciting there. And then thanks again to staff for a great conference, and really enjoyed both the parks tour and the wastewater tour.
Yeah, just thanks, Steph, for a great conference and setting up our tours. I think that was just super valuable in where we are as a city, and ideas that can be had for each of those things that we saw. But anyways, that's all I have.
Awesome. School resource officer meeting earlier. Awesome to get that contract or look to get that contract into place for that additional officer. As Jordan mentioned, I guess the meeting with HBA, as good as you would hope, right? Under those kinds of circumstances, it was nice to be able to answer questions and just continue dialogue. The big message that I wanted to send really on behalf of our council is that we're not scared of conversation, and let's have it. Let's make sure that our team here at City Hall is offering as much information as they can be to those who are asking for it, and be as transparent and open as possible. And then as Kathleen mentioned, being at the dedication of the health center, just a phenomenal new resource for our community here. A lot of our rural communities, I mentioned there that day, have a harder time with our neighbors being able to access all the services that are now going to both be increased and picked up. So that's awesome. And then with Chris here, I just want to also mention the trick or treat trail. I just hope this isn't Lucy's last year wanting to do it. You worry about that every year. The kids in our community just have such a tremendous time doing that. And in fact, during COVID, it was one of the only kind of fun things that our kids look forward to. So thank you for the continued service that the chamber gives the community. With that, I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you, everybody.